Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we continue our series of discussions related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The focus this evening will be on the COVID-19 vaccine. Our speaker, Dr. Michael Zelefsky, is the chief of Brachytherapy. Did I pronounce that correctly? At Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. He has many years of experience with cancer treatment and is a highly accomplished physician. Dr. Zelefsky has also helped guide some of our members at Fifth Avenue Synagogue during their times of need. In addition to his work as a doctor, Dr. Zelefsky is a talented Baal Tefillah and Baal Koreh who has led services many times at Fifth Avenue Synagogue, both during the year as well as on the high holidays. And we are truly blessed to have him as a friend of our community, and we thank him for all his assistance. We joke that that he must get his skills as a Baal Tefillah and a Baal Koreh from his son Shlomo, who currently serves as a Baal Tefillah and Baal Koreh at the synagogue and who's doing an excellent job. Dr. Walter Molofsky will formally introduce Dr. Zelefsky. Like Dr. Zelefsky, Dr. Molofsky wears two hats. He too is a highly accomplished and influential physician who currently serves as a doctor of pediatric neurology at Mount Sinai and is considered an expert in his field. In addition to his medical work, Dr. Molofsky has served as a Fifth Avenue Synagogue officer for many years. He is a past president and currently serves as a chairman of the board. And in both of these areas of his life, his professional and his communal, he has always maintained himself with a professionalism, is highly approachable, always with a friendly temperament, and we are truly blessed to have him as a member of our community. Dr. Molofsky will formally introduce Dr. Zelefsky, and President Jacob Gold will moderate the questions after Dr. Zelefsky's presentation.
Thank you, Rabbi, and good evening. It's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Zelefsky this evening. Dr. Zelefsky graduated from Yeshiva University, where, as we all know, the motto of the school is Torah Umada. The university strives to teach excellence in both Torah and secular studies. Here at the Fifth Avenue Synagogue, we are blessed with clergy and members who have demonstrated excellence and success in both spheres. We have renowned rabbis with PhDs. We have a chazan who's a professor of music. We have members who are extremely successful in business, finance, medicine, law, and philanthropy. And we have who have taught Mishnah and Talmud classes and given Divrei Torah in shul. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Zelefsky, who exemplifies this vast tradition of excellence in both Torah and secular achievements. Dr. Zelefsky as Rabbi Babich has mentioned, has close ties with the Fifth Avenue Synagogue, serving as the official Baal Koreh from 1987 to 1992, and having led services and Torah reading on many occasions in subsequent years. He received his rabbinic ordination and smircha from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Zichron Livracha, and received his MD degree from Albert Einstein College of Medicine. He's a recognized international authority in the treatment of prostate cancer. Dr. Zelefsky is chief of Brachytherapy at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where he has developed an expertise both here and around the world in specialized implantation treatments for prostate cancer and other types of cancer. And he is vice chair of clinical research at the Department of Radiotherapy and a professor of radiation oncology. And he holds the endowed Stephen Greenberg Chair of Prostate Cancer Research at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Dr. Zelefsky also serves as a leader of genitourinary disease management team at the hospital and has been instrumental in the development of novel radiation techniques which have been adopted worldwide. and he has published over 350 articles and chapters. Dr. Zelefsky is currently exploring approaches using targeted biological agents concurrent with precision radiotherapy to increase cure rates for prostate cancer treatment. Dr. Zelefsky is the editor-in-chief of an international journal entitled Brachytherapy, which represents really the premier journal in the world for articles devoted to the use of brachytherapy in the treatment of cancer. And he's received many awards in recognition for his contributions in this area. We are also blessed that he has joined us for many Shabbases and Yom Tovim, both leading the services, laning, and with his beautiful family. And he has passed on this tradition of davening skills to his sons. And Baruch Hashem, we await his grandchildren taking over in the future. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rabbi Michael Zelefsky, who will be speaking to us tonight on his work on prostate cancer and COVID-19 vaccine. Good evening, Dr. Zelefsky.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molofsky.
So, Michael, thank you so much for giving our community so much time this evening. Have to first start, which I'm sure is going to be a nice story, is how you ended up at Fifth Avenue Synagogue. And you can imitate anyone you want.
You want me to tell that story?
Yes, please. So it's on record.
Well, actually, the way this happened was my sister and I, we both play the piano, and my sister actually had a gig with Chazan Malavani. And the Chazan needed somebody to accompany him to play the national anthem and some other pieces. So my sister did a fantastic job along with the cantor, and he was very happy with her. And then she asked him, you know, my brother is moving into Manhattan. Does the Fifth Avenue Synagogue need anybody to read the Torah? So he said, well, it just so happens that we may need somebody. And it just so happens that we may need somebody for the High Holy Days as well. So he took me into that front office, that is the cantor, and gave me basically a audition. And after about 15 minutes, he said, I think you pass, and we would love to have you. And the rest is history at Fifth Avenue Synagogue.
Thank you for sharing that. So our time is limited tonight, but why don't we jump into the vaccine, which is what I think most of the participants are interested in hearing about. So you took the vaccine this past week or the week before?
Yes, last week, those who are on the quote-unquote front lines in our hospital were, as part of the distribution plan, received the vaccine. Actually, the first ones to receive the vaccine in our hospital, like many other hospitals in New York, as part of a phased distribution, would be those who are really on the front line, those in the intensive care units, who really actively manage patients with COVID, on respirators even, and those in the urgent care center. And then our nurses and those who directly manage those patients. And then as well, all those physicians who have direct contact with patients on a regular basis. Those are, of course, the nurses, residents, fellows, and of course the attending faculty. So I was included in that. And our hospital at Sloan Kettering currently is administering the Pfizer vaccine. And so that, as you know, as well as the Moderna, is a two-part vaccine. The Pfizer is given for 3 weeks apart, first dose and then the second dose, and the Moderna is about 4 weeks apart, 28 days. So this is part of a phased distribution, and the hope is that over the next few months, the entire hospital faculty and those employed in the hospital hopefully should be vaccinated.
So let's jump into it. So the vaccine, was it painful? Can you tell us a little more about it? Just like a shot, or what does it feel like?
Well, basically, the Pfizer vaccine, as you probably know, that's why it's not as straightforward to just take it out of a box and from Pfizer and inoculate somebody. It has to be at really sub-zero temperatures, actually roughly about minus 80, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and so it has to be really kept super cold. It is really, you get it just like any kind of a flu vaccine, and it's in the generally in the arm. The most common side effects would be shoulder pain, maybe mild fatigue, possibly some fever. So I had some shoulder pain about 24 hours to 48 hours, and then it dissipated. Most people tolerate it extraordinarily well. Again, the most common would be pain related to the vaccination site. That's not infrequent when it comes to the typical, flu vaccine as well.
So you took the first dose, you said last week, and you had
Right, last week, and slated to take the next one in a couple of weeks.
Okay. And how does it work? I heard there was a center that people got the first one and they might not get the second one. Can you explain? I assume you need both to be 100%, but the first one's 80 or 60. How does that work?
Well, if you, the trials that were done, and these were large trials, very scientifically performed and established trials, which are called phase 3 randomized trials, where some got placebo and some got the vaccine. And the Pfizer studies, just like the Moderna studies, had shown the efficacy of this vaccine in about 95% of people who received the injection. So in general, this is, the tests, the way they were done was as a 2-part vaccination study. In other words, you get the vaccine, and then to further boost that immune response, you get another shot, kind of like a booster, about 3 or 4 weeks later. If you just got one, it's hard to really know because the studies really weren't done like that, but it's presumed that you boost that initial efficacy from, hard to know, 60 or 70% up to 95%. But again, the studies were done and designed as part of a 2-step process, and the same with the Moderna vaccine as well.
Can you tell us a little bit, from a medical practice, having this out so quickly, is it a medical miracle? Can you talk about that? In the timing, have you ever seen something like this?
Sure, it's really unprecedented, but again, the whole COVID vaccine, the whole COVID experience is so unprecedented. But there was an incredible, a rush to get this done, but I would emphasize that the studies were done not in any kind of a rushed way. They were done in a very scientifically established and extraordinarily meticulous fashion. So, it was definitely incredible how now we have 2 FDA approved, and the AstraZeneca, Oxford, the additional ones have been, approved. So I would say, without a doubt, it's really amazing how we have these vaccines now available to take care of people. I mentioned to the nurse who gave me the vaccine, actually, just anecdotally, you know, what an incredible feeling it must be where people's lives had been completely turned around and around and around, where we know, I'm sure all of us know people, close friends, relatives who have been severely affected, and maybe succumbed to COVID as well. And to be able, you know, during this year to administer a vaccine and change people's lives and move towards normalcy is an incredible opportunity. It's really what I would say a divine help. It's what we would call siyata dishmaya.
So I know the media doesn't want to give the president any reward or any compliment, but I mean, in other words, how do you explain the timing of it? Was the military involved, they say, or in other words, what really got it to go so quickly? Was it?
Well, I can't speak from any expertise on that, but what I could say is that I think that there was clearly a recognition of the incredible importance of getting a vaccine and bringing us towards normalcy. I mean, herd immunity would only be really achieved with an opportunity of vaccinations. So I think it was clearly recognized that if we wanted to really bring our lives back to normal, we would need a vaccine program. And if that's the case, there's a lot of planning that's necessary as far as the distribution of the vaccine and how to get it to people and get it to those high-risk people in particular. You know, certainly elderly people are definitely more at risk, and really, if anybody needs the vaccine, it's certainly older people to be able to, you know, to develop the antibodies and mount an antibody response to an infection. We know, for instance, that people who are in their mid-80s, for instance, have almost a 600 times likelihood of succumbing to the COVID-19 virus more than much younger people, and 75-year-olds and more have a 200-fold increased risk of succumbing to the virus. So I think it's critical to get it to the high-risk people, get it to the ones who are really on the front lines, and get it to patients, and get it to the elderly and to those high-risk patients to really bring us hopefully back to normalcy sooner.
So before we talk about the process, you know, be at Sloan or what's going on in New York as far as getting the vaccine and who gets it first, can you just curious if you can share with us, the Sloan evidently chose Pfizer over Moderna. Was it because it was available, or they specifically preferred Pfizer?
I'm not totally privy to the actual decision, but certainly Pfizer was approved first, then came subsequently Moderna. But my understanding is that as time goes on, there's really no issue with one vaccine over the other, and I think our institution would be certainly committed utilizing the Moderna vaccine as well. I do know, however, that if you started out with one vaccine as far as number one, you should continue with the same product at your second vaccination.
AstraZeneca, which I think they're taking in other countries, is not approved in the United States yet. Is that correct?
Right, and other vaccines, I think, are going to emerge, and I think that will allow greater availability and the ability to distribute it to those who need it as well. And there are vaccines that are coming out that, you know, that probably will be available in the United States of just a one-dose vaccine. So there's no evidence that one vaccine is better than the other right now. And the side effect profiles appear to be equal between one and the other.
So your understanding, or in other words, for people on the call or on the Zoom that want to get the vaccine, what's your understanding? Did doctors get it first in New York, or elderly people got it first and then doctors? What's
Well,
the
according to the distribution plan in New York, it's those who are on the front lines first who are managing such patients. So these are the frontline healthcare workers. That is those people in intensive care units, the nurses, the physicians, and all those involved, not only in an intensive care unit, in an emergency room as well. And then those physicians who are facing inpatients, at hospitals. So it's all part of, there are phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, there's A, B, and C, and so mostly it's the physicians on the front lines, and then eventually moving to the patients, of course.
Okay. So the physicians were first, the patients in the hospital patients, or what's the
Right,
age that?
yes, inpatients, and of course patients who are obviously at higher risk or who may be in the midst of these kinds of treatments, even outpatient treatments as well. Clearly, those individuals, are certainly more susceptible, and they need our attention turned to them to make sure that they get vaccinated at the appropriate time. So it's a monumental effort, obviously, to vaccinate in a relatively short period of time an entire population. But that's what is needed to get us to those next steps we talked about.
Right. So what's the age that is considered elderly? Is it 65, or what's the
Well, over 90 is pretty is elderly, but
as far as
but
getting the
as
vaccine?
far as the vaccination, breakdowns, it's generally, I've seen, greater than 65, greater than 75. Studies that have looked at susceptibility and risk for getting over infections in COVID, even in the earlier phases of COVID, have looked at patients in their 80s versus patients in their 70s and patients in the 60s and less. So, but we all know just from experience that, even younger patients could develop COVID and have a very virulent form of the infection where they've deteriorated rapidly. So there's a tremendous amount of unpredictability regarding a patient's course. That's what's made this infection so challenging for physicians. And I think one thing we could say is how very little we know. I mean, I'm not an infectious disease expert, and so I can't answer all of these questions with that kind of an authority as somebody who is an infectious disease specialist. But I mean, obviously, we all know as physicians in the field how challenging this could be. And even with all of the knowledge and all of the expertise of an infectious disease specialist and department, we all know that we were basically helpless. And we were learning along the way. And even at this point, where people ask, well, how long could the vaccine work for? And how long will it take to develop antibodies? And if you have antibodies already, could you be, do you still need it? There's so many unanswered questions. The answers we have are really from those trials that have given us very important information. But I think there are going to be a lot of questions that maybe we're going to be discussing this evening. And I think most of those questions truly can't be answered until we develop more experience with the vaccine, with what it accomplishes, and at the same time, what is it going to do to the population and to this virus. Hopefully turn it off. Hopefully everybody should be immune to it, but time will tell. So again, I think that's what one of the aspects of COVID-19 as far as the medical community, the healthcare community, is I think it's been a humbling experience. It's really an experience which has taught us how much we don't know and how much we need to learn about it. And I think many people have recognized how lucky they are to get through infections and get through it incredibly, and while others have had more difficulties.
So just for people on the Zoom, so if you're over 65, you call your doctor, or is someone going to be calling you? Do you have an idea what the process is? I mean, can you be proactive?
Well, there are, in hospitals, I think I could speak for my hospital, but I'm sure in the major hospitals in New York City, there are established rollout programs for this, and we've been encouraged not to sort of say, when can I get it, because it would be obviously chaotic if everybody was asking for it. But there are established guidelines as to when it would be available for each of the physicians and healthcare workers. And there is an established rollout that we get as far as the healthcare workers in our hospital, an email invite to schedule the vaccine. The way it worked with me is that I got this email invite, and you choose a time where many people are being vaccinated during these half-hour periods by, in 10 separate rooms, and this is going on throughout the day, and even evening as well.
So people will go to their hospitals to get vaccinated eventually. They're not going to go.
They're going to speak, obviously, to their, encouraged to speak to their physicians to know when it is available in those particular hospitals, of course. So if you're affiliated with a hospital like Mount Sinai or NYU or Cornell, those physicians that have been taking care of you will certainly be able to alert you as to a schedule, a rollout for established patients, in those respective hospitals.
I'm just curious, now that you've taken it, your wife has not, I assume, right? Do spouses get you don't have...
No, spouses don't, because it's only for those who have the direct contact as far as the first ones getting it. But we expect that over the next several months, people will be getting these vaccines, and I would anticipate, and I'm just guessing here, that by May or June, a large percentage of patients and a large percentage of people in New York City will be receiving their vaccine. It's interesting. You may have read this, in the newspapers. That there clearly is a segment of the population that is not really too enthusiastic about getting the vaccine, and some of those could be even, I'm talking to somebody this weekend, some of them could be physicians as well, and they're I think in general I could say that the medical community in our hospital are really all for the vaccine. And I think the general approach is that all staff are highly encouraged to take the vaccine. Is it mandatory to take the vaccine in our hospital? I'm pretty sure no, it is not mandatory, but it is highly encouraged. And I presume that that's going to be the same, the same posture in some of the, in many of the other hospitals as well. I don't know. I don't think it could be absolutely mandated as obligatory to take it, and if you don't, you lose your position at a hospital, for instance. But it seems to me that it is so important for us to go to the next steps that's really the case. It is strongly encouraged, and some people are concerned maybe about certain side effects or unknown aspects, and of course there are unknown aspects, but if you look even at the 80,000 patients, it's an incredible number, 80,000 patients if you combine the Pfizer and the Moderna studies, the likelihood of any severe reactions is extraordinarily small. And sometimes a side effect that's probably not linked but has to be in any way, maybe by law, associated, because we just don't know if it's really associated. It could be just coincidental to the vaccine, but those get reported anyway. So I'd say the take-home message is that this is really safe, it's important to take, and I think many physicians are encouraging those who they take care of to take the vaccine, again, to allow us to move forward and bring our lives to normalcy.
So Dr. Zelefsky, someone like yourself, once you get the second, would you wear a mask? Do you need to wear a mask? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a very important question. That question is coming up all the time. If you have the vaccine, do you still need to distance yourself? Do you still need to practice those precautions? And the CDC and these are the general recommendations, of course, that you still need to do that. We still don't know, as I mentioned before, how long that immunity will be. And maybe you are protected yourself when you get the vaccine. You mount that antibody response. But are you safe vis-a-vis other people as well? So you may have carry a virus or catch something, but you can mount an antibody response. But are you going to be safe being in close contact with other people as well? And how long will that antibody response last? And will it that response hang around in exactly the same way for other people? I mean, that's really unknown. So until we really know, the safe thing is you get the vaccine, and hopefully you're in that 95%. We mentioned before, if you're in that 5%, you're going to be at risk as well. So because of those uncertainties, the recommendation definitely is to continue with the mask wearing. And then if you ask, well, how long will we need to do that? Another 6 months? Another year? I mean, as long as it takes for us to get greater and greater confidence that we know how long the antibody response is there. And who knows, we may, with all of that information, know, okay, when is the next booster shot going to be? Is it 6 months? Is it a year, like the flu vaccine? We know that there are some mutations of this virus. We've heard these harrowing stories, stories from London, and the more virulent mutation. Probably these vaccines, we're assuming, will cover that as well. That's what I have seen from what experts have discussed. And it's hopefully not likely that there will be any kind of significant mutations, but again, this is going to be watched very carefully right now.
So for someone who had COVID, are you allowed to take the vaccine, or is it bad to take it? How does that work?
That's another very good question. And there is experience for those people that have had COVID getting the vaccine, and it seems to be well tolerated. But the initial trials, the Pfizer and the Moderna, these were for patients that did not have the infection. So I think we need more experience in that regard. But, interestingly as well, you could say, well, I had the infection. Some people, if they had a mild case, they may not have garnered any antibodies. But there have been also established reports that people who had extremely, severe cases, they lost their antibodies as well. And so there's so much that we don't know. It's their hypotheses that maybe it overwhelmed the immune system and it basically wasn't able to generate an antibody response. I think all of these things reflect again and again how much we don't know and how much we need to be cautious even as we move forward with the vaccine. We can't be too, assured that everything, once you get your second dose, or if it's a one-dose vaccine, that it's fine and you are free to go and travel wherever you want without any masks. I think our lives won't get back to totally visibly normal for a good year, I would guess. But I think that we'll achieve some state of normalcy as been predicted by, the CDC and those experts probably in autumn of this year.
So we have Walter and Brenda with us on the call. And Walter, do you want to, have you taken, both you and Brenda have started also?
Yeah, our hospitals have the same rollout as Dr. Zelefsky has mentioned. It's a staged rollout where people in the intensive care units and the ICUs and the ERs have sort of been on the first list. And then those of us who take care of patients, on a daily basis who in those units, are also been invited to take the vaccine. And I would just say that I agree with what Dr. Zelefsky has said. Other than a local injection site, the reactions have been quite, just a little pain, have been minimal and really no different than any other vaccine that we've taken so far. And I do think that
so Walter, you took the Pfizer also, or you took Moderna?
Yeah, the Pfizer, yeah, and that's only because it came out first. I think our hospital now has received shipments of Moderna, and some of my colleagues who went in to get the vaccine this week, more recently, have been offered the Moderna vaccine, which has a little bit easier transport and has a little bit easier storage, so that may become a little bit more available. There's even talk in England now about the possibility of, if depending on availability, could you mix the vaccines? And so far people say, well, you shouldn't because that's not the protocol, but if it's been done, apparently there is immune response that's developed, so that might make it a little bit more available to people as well.
Walter, you were fortunate enough to also marry a doctor, so Brenda also took the vaccine, so that works well.
I did take the vaccine. I took the Pfizer as well. That was what was offered, exactly as Dr. Zelefsky said. And I just want to just stress again that the vaccine was not going to be given at CVS or Walgreens, at least not at the present time. 1 out of 30,000 individuals might have a little bit of a difficulty that warrants being in a hospital setting, not overwhelming. But because it's still an unknown, that's one reason to have it in the hospital. The other reason is that it has to be maintained in a very protected environment, as Dr. Zelefsky said, which is in a very cold, frozen environment. And so it's best to be very regulatory in terms of the distribution of the vaccine. So again, it's not something that you can be able to walk in like the flu shot to go to the local CVS or Walgreens to get the vaccine, at least not at this time.
And I'm sure you had this experience as well, when it's given in, a first-class hospital setting, that there are precautions that are taken as well. So when you are seen by the nurse, there is a history that's taken. Do you have any allergic reactions? Have you been exposed to anybody with COVID? Because if you've had an active infection, you probably shouldn't get the vaccine. Have you had any flu vaccine? Because the recommendation is that if you just had a flu vaccine, you shouldn't take the COVID vaccine. And finally, routinely as well, after a vaccination, you are monitored for about 15 minutes with an observation, just to make sure that everything has been tolerated well, and there are no issues. I think there was just anecdotally and just amusing, there was a video that was floating around in social media of a
Nurse.
brave nurse who took the vaccine, and I think there was so many reporters there that she was so nervous about the media attention that she passed out at the time that she took the vaccine. And I don't think it was related to the vaccine, but I think to I think some of the anxiety of having all the media and all that attention on you. But I think like the Molofskys have just said, really now, it's a very well tolerated vaccine, and that's why it is generally encouraged to, really go and get it when it becomes available.
So, Dr. Zelefsky, you might not know the answer to this, but I have friends and family in other states, Florida, Tennessee, etc., that have been able to get the vaccine already. Do you have any idea? I mean, I know you know Sloan and New York, but you know what's going on in different states, or not really? As far as
Yeah, I'm not that aware of it, but I've spoken to colleagues of mine in other places in the United States, like in Texas and in Florida, and some in the Midwest, and it's there are other areas where these phased distributions, like we just spoke about, are not completely adhered to. I know, for instance, which we're not talking about, but in Israel, there is basically, it's like almost like first come, first serve, and people have access to the vaccines now in Israel, and incredibly, but they had vaccinated a significant, component of the population. And I think you've seen in the media as well how there are lots of vaccines that are in New York City, and there are a lot of people who are waiting for them. I think we need better distribution plans and getting this out in the city. But yes, doing it very, very carefully and well, right? No, not like a CVS. I mean, not that CVS can't distribute that properly, but I think in the beginning you want to do this in a very careful and meticulous way.
Dr. Zelefsky, something we were talking about with Walter before, before we all got on. Do you want to talk a little bit about your perspective on telemedicine? You were saying post-COVID, you feel that that's sort of the way of the future?
Sure. I believe it was in April and May where we really stopped seeing patients face to face, and then I do also surgical procedures at the hospital in addition to seeing patients, obviously during consultations, and we stopped that completely. And there are, in certain fields in medicine and in oncology, there are maneuvers that could be done to sort of delay the primary therapy and suppress disease until you are able to give this kind of face-to-face. There's certain hormonal manipulations or certain kinds of chemotherapy that can be given as a one-time infusion every couple of weeks, instead of the treatments that we give, which are daily or a face-to-face treatment. And basically, one of the challenges, of course, was, people not interested in showing up to hospitals. And there were obvious concerns that some disease would be growing in the interim. And that was a real challenge, I think, for the entire medical community, not only the oncology community, but even, the general medical community, because of the recognition that people need to get their general, conditions addressed and not let it get out of hand. So, but we, have at our hospital, as really all the major hospitals in the city and around the country, explored platforms for telemedicine. This has been thought about for many years, but it really exploded. I mean, look how Zoom exploded in the last 6 months. It's incredible. And so there are certain healthcare platforms. We use a lot of Doximity, but there are other opportunities and platforms as well, like even WhatsApp. And surprisingly, and we did a survey, that we were asking patients, were you happy with the telemedicine encounter with your physician? And what was incredible was that, yes, patients were happy with it. They really felt they had a connection. But interestingly, when they were asked, would you be interested in pursuing this connection even if after COVID-19 has been resolved, they said yes. 70% actually said they were happy with the encounter and they would like to do that. And I think we've learned that telemedicine is going to be here to stay in a percentage of people. Look, there's certain people who absolutely need to be connected to their physician with a face-to-face encounter. But there are going to be a significant proportion that don't want the hassle of coming in, especially if they can have their tests programmed to take care of and then discuss those results with the physician on a telemedicine platform. So I think what's turned out of this whole COVID harrowing experience is that the way physicians and patients will interact in the future is going to be and has been radically changed. And I believe that in the future years, is going to be a significant percentage of our patients who will meet their physicians on a telemedicine platform. And I think we'll have to figure out what's the most effective way of doing that. I mean, obviously surgery can't be done on telemedicine, and certain critical decisions and examinations that need to be made with the physician present, can't be done on telemedicine as well. I mean, Dr. Molofsky, as a pediatric neurologist, there's no real substitute for a neurologic exam, through telemedicine, I imagine. Who knows? There could be inventions in the future, but you need that interaction and that personal touch to come up with diagnoses and recommendations. So it still has to be worked out, Jacob, but I would say that that's one of, maybe I would say, a potential benefit of COVID-19 experience.
Interesting. Walter and Brenda, you want to add to that from your profession?
No, I think the experience has been quite similar. I know I spoke about this a few months ago, but a lot of, especially for follow-up visits or for visits with established patients where they've coming in to review their medication history, to review their medication response, to review test results. They're very happy to do this on the telephone. They don't have to take, especially in my case, they don't have to take the children out of school. The parents don't have to miss a day of work if they're working now. And they don't want to be exposed to the hospital setting right now. And it's extremely convenient. And I would say, and I've talked to Michael about this before the meeting, easily I could continue half my practice, if not more, on a telemedicine platform. Certainly after the first visit or two, and as I mentioned before, are you still having headaches? Are you still having seizures? Is the medicine making you feel better? These questions can be asked, on a Zoom call or on a telemedicine platform and can be handled quite well. I have a little hesitancy. I'm not in the same field as Dr. Zelefsky, and I know that a lot of patients who come to him have clinical symptoms that may require examination, at least initially, and that would require in-person visits. But then reviewing the progress, the results, the test results, I think, as he's mentioned, can be done remotely.
Brenda, the same for you?
I think that, yeah, I think it's the same. I don't think we'll know what the ramifications are. We won't know to what extent telehealth continues and will be accepted by patients, insurance reimbursements, and what the system will be. I think we also probably don't know the full ramifications of this type of changed interaction between patient and physician, and hopefully it will be able to maintain top-tier medical care in a distance setting. So I think we have to be careful to define which patients really benefit from that.
I think Brenda has brought up an excellent point in that sometimes the patients will be lulled into a false sense of security that they could manage a lot of things kind of on their own, and sometimes established visits need to still be done on a kind of regular basis to maintain surveillance and do it properly. Because yes, there are risks with it, and I think it needs to be managed in a very thoughtful way.
So, Dr. Zelefsky, the vaccine is very hot right now, and it's extremely important that you were able to, share your experience and your perspective. But I actually was out dinner with a few friends last week, and I was shocked that the conversation at the dinner table was prostate cancer. So I know that's your specialty, so I wanted to at least cover some ground in that area. Are there any diet modifications or best ways to reduce cancer risk in general or prostate cancer?
Right. Well, as just a means of introduction, Jacob, you know, it is well known that if somebody lives to 120, God willing, if you look carefully at their prostate, you'll see prostate cancer. And a message that is out there is that there is people will have prostate cancer, but not necessarily die of prostate cancer, because there are many prostate cancers that are really indolent, non-aggressive, and I think over the last 10 and maybe 20 years, but especially in the last 10 years, there's now an established recognition in our field that not all cancers need to be treated. And in fact, there is a low-risk cancer that for years people treated and they got the best results. But the reason they got the best results was that they probably didn't need treatment, so the results look great. And so for certain types of prostate cancers, we routinely just recommend surveillance, watching it. And there are a lot of them out there that could simply be watched. Watch with a blood test, which is called the PSA, the prostate specific antigen, which is generally between 0 and 4, but in older patients it could be 5 or even 6. We rely heavily nowadays on MRIs to be able to visualize where any disease could be. And if a biopsy is done and it falls under the category of non-aggressive, you just watch it and keep an eye on it. Now, you sort of alluded to, well, what could you do in an active way to maintain the health of your prostate? Obviously, you have to be a male to maintain the health of your prostate. But among males and older males will generally note maybe they'll urinate much more frequently at night or during the day. That's not a sign of prostate cancer. It's a sign of benign enlargement of the prostate gland that just compresses that channel where the urine goes through. So how could you maintain the health of your prostate? Believe it or not, it's like maintaining, for women, the health of their breasts, and even colon. Reduction of all of these cancers associated with a diet that is healthy. What does that mean? Low fat diet, a diet in particular for prostate cancer that may have other aspects associated with it. more vegetables and fruits and vegetables in the diet, less spicy and fried foods. Obviously, that's helpful for the coronary health, cardiac health as well. So there's a lot of overlaps to this. There's certain foods that, may promote, better health. Believe it or not, soy products could actually promote, and there are differing viewpoints about it, but soy products that could promote a greater or better health for the prostate as well. So I think these aspects are important, and people who would like to maintain a better health of the prostate, it is diet manipulation, it's exercise as well. And just leading a healthy lifestyle would be very important in those aspects.
Thank you. Could you tell us, Sloan, I'm sure, is the cutting edge, but tell us some of the new discoveries or treatments for prostate cancer over the last
Sure. I came to Sloan Kettering, actually, my first day at Sloan Kettering was my first day at Fifth Avenue Synagogue.
Wow.
And we basically, as of July 1st, moved into Manhattan and was giving the Mishnah Shir, I think, on that day. I think I had my car stolen on that first day as well. But then they found it a few months later, a few weeks later maybe. But I remember back, 30 years ago, and now what we do, night and day, as far as the innovation, as far as technological breakthroughs, we are so much more pinpointed and focused, with significantly less side effects as we target radiation to just treat the prostate and minimize the dosing to the surrounding normal tissues. People tolerating this incredibly well. We have many patients say, oh, I remember my grandfather had radiation treatments back a long time ago. Back then, there were serious side effects associated with radiation. Nowadays, it is a totally different world. And that's why the success rates and with radiation parallels is on par with surgery. And so if somebody has prostate cancer that needs to be treated, the success rates when it's confined is equal with surgery and radiation. And a very large study, which was published in one of the most prominent medical journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, reported on a PROTECT trial, where by the flip of a coin, some people got surgery, some people had radiation. 10 years later, equal results, equal cure rates when done well. So I think it's a very encouraging message that if it's deemed that treatments are required, then very focused radiation treatments or surgery provide very high success rates. And I think that's what's really encouraging now in 2020. And we are leading efforts in the hospital to try to utilize some of these genomic profiling to better understand who are the patients that could just be watched, but who are the patients that really need treatment. And I think looking more carefully at the disease and analyzing the genes that are associated with them, looking at various mutations or not, these directions are revolutionizing the way oncology is being practiced worldwide. So I think we're now in situations that are really very exciting as well.
Great. So, Doctor, I know we said it would be an hour. There are a few questions from the Q&A. Can I try to give you one or two? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. So if the vaccine temp is 90 degrees, doesn't the temperature create some trauma in the injection site or in the body?
Well, it's not injected at sub-zero temperatures. It's wait till it cools off or the opposite of cooling off, but until it gets to room temperature. So when they take it out of the freezer, they have to wait a bit. And actually, I waited about 15, 20 minutes, but they probably took it out because there was a little bit of a line there to get that. So a good question, and I'm glad you brought that up.
This is from JB, our friend, Jerry Balsam. Do you expect mRNA technology to impact on oncology?
Oh, obviously so, and it's doing that already. So we, and if the question Jerry is asking is, could some of the technology that has been used now to create these vaccines create new vaccines against cancer? I mean, that has already been explored, but I think as we get better sense of where what the elements of certain diseases are, we can target that right now. We're doing something incredibly interesting right now. There are certain kinds of PET scans that light up where prostate cancer is located. And we are now utilizing this PET scan, really incredible technology where it lights up where the PSA blood test is, and we're putting a payload on it like a missile, so that when it goes in the body, it seeks out where the activity of disease is and drops like the missile of radiation onto specific areas. That's always been the difficulty with chemotherapy. It treats the entire body, all the normal tissues, and that's why there are such, difficult side effects. Wouldn't it be great that there's smart chemotherapy that sees where the cells are and just goes right to those areas? So yes, new technologies are becoming available, and I think mRNA and really other directions to hopefully make a dent in cancer cures.
And someone had mentioned the side effects you said were the shoulder pain you had, right? What was the other one that some people have fever, you said, or
Some people have fevers, some people have malaise, the aches, some people have joint pains, pretty common side effect profile that you would see with the flu vaccine. So nothing that, unusual. For somebody to come with a full-blown COVID, presentation would be extraordinarily unusual. And, you could look up on the internet and find anything there, and there are reports like that. But again, we're talking about a fraction of a percent.
So Rabbi Babich and Lisa posted something on the chat, but I was going to ask you, first of all, do you have to test? I know when you do testing in the hospitals now, they make you test for COVID beforehand. You get the vaccine, do they make you test for COVID?
If you're asymptomatic, generally you're not tested again.
Okay.
But for those people who are, let's say, coming in for a procedure that we are doing, they are routinely tested for COVID, and that's done routinely in all the hospitals.
Rabbi and Lisa Babich posted they know of 2 people who took the vaccine and the next day they tested COVID positive. That's just a coincidence.
Well, first of all, the antibody doesn't kick in right away.
Okay.
So anything is possible there. And if that COVID, if you say, is that a virulent COVID, or if in 4 or 5 days will it dissipate as a result of having the vaccine? I think we go back to what we said before. We know very little about this, and the significance of that positive test, I can't say I profess to know what that is.
Okay. So first of all, Michael, I want to thank you for your mentorship, your friendship, and for everything you do for the community and for really all of Klal Yisrael. You do so much chesed. And instead of keeping you on tonight, I'd like to hopefully maybe we can have a follow-up, as the vaccine progresses. We can talk about how things are going and maybe discuss a little more prostate cancer. I know you're in your office. I'm sure you're eager to get home, so I don't want to keep you. And I also want to thank Walter and Brenda for participating with us tonight. I think we have 3 people who took the vaccine I'm jealous. I have to join you guys. But either way, Michael, thank you for everything you do, and really appreciate your time this evening. And thank you for Shlomo.
Thank you so much again to you, Jacob, and thank you to Walter and Brenda, and for your time as well this evening. I share with you the hope as well that in the very near future, we will bring ourselves closer to normalcy. I anticipate in the very, very near future, in the next few months, that we will all be vaccinated together and get back to a normal way of life.
I mean, I'm sorry, Rabbi, did you have any questions? I'm sorry, because I saw you on the chat. I didn't know.
Oh, no, no. The only question I had was if you had any idea, being that it won't be offered in CVS or Duane Reade, any idea how it will be implemented and provided to the masses, assuming most people do not necessarily have a connection to one of the major hospitals?
Well, I don't exactly know the answer to the question, and maybe the Molofskys do know. I can't say that in the next year or so it would be precluded from places like a Walgreens or CVS if they're able to demonstrate that they can store this properly and they have the appropriate quality assurance and equipment that they could handle it. I presume that will be available in the future as well. I think as the initial rollouts, I think it's appropriate to do this in a very guarded and carefully laid out environment so that we really get a handle on how it's done and how people are tolerating it. And in fact, all of us who get the vaccine are asked to fill out surveys how they're feeling day by day so that we provide this information and it'll be informative to the public as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. It was really very informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rabbi.
Take
Have a
care.
great
Stay
evening,
safe.
everyone.
Thank you. Everyone stay safe.
Amen.